Hey everybody, thank you so much for tuning into Midgard Musings today and watching today's video. My name is Jesse and I'm the host here on this channel, as you may or may not already know. If this is your first time, I appreciate your support. For everybody else who's already supported Midgard Musings through your views, comments, likes, and subscriptions, thank you very much. I want to call to attention the fact that I am actively and aggressively seeking 2,000 subscribers by or before January 1st, 2020. Alright, that means that we need to get at least 3 new subscribers every day until then, and your help is greatly appreciated. I couldn't do this, well, I could do this if it wasn't for each and every one of you, but it wouldn't be nearly as fun because I would just be talking to nobody. Alright, so everybody's participation and involvement on this channel is greatly appreciated. I invite you to please, right down here, see it, right down there, please click that subscribe button. And if you don't want to miss any videos here on this channel, be sure to click the bell notifications, because then you will get notified every time that I upload new content. Alright guys, I appreciate everybody's support, and I look forward to learning new things with each and every one of you about Norse heathenry, Germanic paganism, all that kind of fun stuff. So please, become a subscriber today. That button is right down here. It costs you literally nothing to become a subscriber, and then if you want to be notified, just click the bell for notifications. It's alright if you don't, but it is appreciated if you do. Check the description down below for all the other ways that you can support Midgard Musings through Facebook, Patreon, Teespring, Redbubble, anything else that you see down there. Click on the links, follow them, see if it's something that fits you. I appreciate all your support. Let's jump in to today's video. Hail, and thank you all. Alright everybody, hail and welcome to today's episode of Midgard Musings. Thank you so much for joining me today. This is your first time on this channel. My name is Jesse and I'm the host here. I upload new content every week, usually related to Norse heathenry and Norse heathenry type things. If this is your angle and this is something that you're interested in, please subscribe to the channel today. Help me get to 2,000 subscribers by or before the beginning of the new year. This is a big push that I'm aiming to reach, a big goal that I'm aiming to reach, so we're really pushing hard for that. Your help is greatly appreciated. Check the description down below for all the ways that you can support. You've already heard all that stuff before in the intro, so I'm not going to get into that too much. But today's video, really excited about this. Today's video is episode 10 of the Deity Discussion series, which you can check all the other videos in that series in the playlist section at your convenience. But we've covered a lot of the Norse gods and goddesses, some of them thus far. And today we're going to be discussing and talking more about Baldr, the Shining One. Been really looking forward to this episode, everybody, so thank you for joining me today on this episode. So before we get started, let's go ahead and get our incense lit and the candle burnt, and we will go ahead and get started. I want to show you guys something too real quick before we get into the discussion. There was a gift that I was given yesterday by a friend of mine who is not a Norse pagan, but he does actually have a really interesting path that he follows, and he may actually, as we're planning on actually having him come on the show here at some point over the next few weeks to be a guest to talk about some of that stuff. So what I want to kind of show you guys, maybe not going to be able to see it too well, everybody that's watching live on Facebook, look at this really nice horn cup that my friend gave me. This came from Alehorn, you know, and it's a replacement for a horn cup similar to this that I have since lost. Actually, I believe had it stolen from me. But thank you, Richard. Thank you, Richard, for this awesome, beautiful gift. I'm going to enjoy many, many drinks out of this, many of which are going to be in your company. So, you guys check out Alehorn. I'm not sponsored by them in any way, of course, but this is actually a very good quality horn. It's as good a quality as the one that I got before it. So, there's that. All right. So, if you've not listened to or watched any of the Deity Discussion series videos before, what I usually like to do is I like to try to bring up some facts and historical stuff about the deity that we're talking about, what we know about them from the sources that we have available to us, and then go a little bit into how my experiences with them have been, if any, during my practices. And then, of course, open it up to everybody else that wants to kind of chime in the Facebook Live thing is going, so there's going to be a bunch of people chiming in, I'm sure. But to start off with, let's talk about the name Baldr. It's an Old Norse word, or of course, being it's a Norse deity. It does have some etymologic stuff that we're going to be going into here a little bit. But Baldr is one of the gods of the Aesir tribe, okay? And he is the son of Odin and Frigg. He is the husband of a goddess Nanna and the father of the god Forseti, the law speaker of the gods. And Baldr is said to be loved by all the gods and goddesses and beings that exist in all the realms. He is said to be, so handsome and so physically perfect in his appearance, a cheerful kind, a gracious kind, the personalities and the characteristics that he's typically attributed to. He is all of these things, so much so that he literally radiates light. And so you will oftentimes hear Baldr being referred to as the Shining One. Okay? There's a phenomenal story in the lore about Baldr's death, which I won't go into too much detail here now, but it is a bit of a tragedy. Because he is so loved and because he was so adored by the gods, his death was, it hit everybody really hard. And so it's a wonderful myth that I would encourage anybody to read. You can find it in the Prose Edda, more of the details about it. But it is a wonderful, wonderful tale. So the meaning and etymology of Baldr's name is a bit uncertain, and it's been the topic, at least, of several scholarly debates, okay? And I'm by no means the leading authority of scholarly work when it comes to Old Norse, but what little bit I've known, what little bit I've studied, I can see where that would be. The reason for that is because there's so many different possibilities that can come up of the meaning of his name. There's one argument or instance where the name is of a Proto-Indo-European root. So Baldr being his name, and the root word in Proto-Indo-European is the root word Baal, okay, which is a word that means white. You also have the Old Norse word Bol. Okay, if you're pronouncing in a medieval reconstructed language, or if you're pronouncing Old Norse in medieval reconstructed format, you would say Bol, which is fire. And then there's another hypothesized belief that there's a word that equates to or means Lord in some various Germanic languages, okay? Probably the most straightforward and probable translation or etymologic root of Baldr's name is that it comes from the Old Norse word Baldr, which means bold. Okay, and when I think about it, really any one of those things are possible because of him being the Shining One, the brightness, the boldness of him being who he is and how he's attested to in the lore, at least. It all kind of makes sense. Okay. Now, again, the story of Baldr's death, which I mentioned earlier, is such a important part of Norse mythology because a lot of what we get in like the Prose Edda and some of the other texts that we have, the sagas and stuff, all of these things come down to us starting from a period of during or after the Viking Age, when Scandinavia had already kind of started the conversion process to Christianity. So a lot of the stuff that we hear and see in those sources has a lot of Christian influences being added to it, okay? Because of who was writing it all down, who was documenting it. These people had already kind of gone through that process, and there was that influence, recalling some of the cultural myths, the folklore, that type of stuff, and adding some of the Christian elements to it. The cool thing about Baldr's story and his death is that it is contained in sources that predate the Viking Age and that predate all that. So it's a very old tale, and it's something very ancient at its core, if you will. Okay. Now Snorri Sturluson, who wrote the Prose Edda, his version of Baldr's myth kind of portrays Baldr as a god or deity that is associated with, like I said, light, brightness, the sun, joy, cheerfulness, peace, harmony, all of these really good, positive, upbeat things. And in the sources, in the lore, whether it be the Poetic Edda or the Prose Edda, there's very little that Baldr has to say or do with regards to anything other than the fact of him, having dreams of his death and being concerned about it. And he doesn't really get a whole lot of dialogue in those sources, right? So he's relatively silent and doesn't have a very detailed characteristic other than what Snorri kind of describes him as, right? We don't know a lot about him from that source. Now, one of the other things is that there's an element of Baldr that is documented or recorded by a different historian or a different source that portrays Baldr in a much different light, and that source is Saxo Grammaticus. Saxo Grammaticus was a Danish historian from somewhere around the 12th, 13th centuries, and he, like I said, paints Baldr in a much different light because the history of the Danish people, the Gesto Danorum, okay, which is the deeds of the Danes. That's the series of texts that Saxo Grammaticus, one of the series of texts that Saxo has is credited to being the author of. In that version, when Saxo is talking about Baldr, Baldr is the son of Odin, okay, and a mortal woman who is in competition with Nanna's foster brother, because Baldr wants to marry Nanna. He sees her bathing and is kind of taken over by lust to have her as his wife, and there's this competition between Nanna's foster brother, who also wants her, and Nanna's foster brother is Holder. And like I said, if you want to read the whole story of this, it's the deeds of the Danes, or Gesto Danorum, which is Saxo's, like I said earlier, the text that he's authored. But in that instances, or in that telling of Baldr's story, he's kind of portrayed as a warrior type, and kind of itching for the fight, and being a very bold and violent character. Now, you have to keep in mind that when Saxo is writing about these things, he's actually talking about historical figures in Denmark, and their connection being with that the gods were actually people who lived, and kings and all this kind of stuff. So I guess the spirit behind the telling of the story is obviously, we're talking about the same figure in a sense, but when it comes to what Saxo wrote down versus what Snorri gave us, there is some obvious differences in that aspect. Okay, but now I'm just looking over my notes. So in history and literary work aside, we could focus on all day long. Let's talk a bit about veneration or worship of this specific deity, because that's kind of how we as Norse pagans, we have these figures that a lot of us will choose to venerate and honor. I haven't been able to find anything, and I don't think anything exists that shows any specific practice or veneration or worship given to Baldr from a historical aspect, right? It's very common, for myself included, in rituals and stuff like that, especially for certain times of the year, to honor him and to hail him in ritual, and to mention him and to honor him in that way. So it may not be anything historically accurate that we can find that says that yes, Baldr definitely or specifically had folks who honored him specifically, but it is not an uncommon thing to see in modern heathenry, at least. Okay, and again, with his association being the brightest of the gods, the best of the gods, the white, the shining one, the association between him and the sun, he is very often honored and venerated during times when the sun is at its brightest. So usually like around the longest day of the year, which is the solstice, the summer solstice. And I know that that's not historical either, because the Norse didn't observe their holy tides from a solstice-based thing. They were lunar-based. But again, all that aside, the historical aspects aside, modern heathens will quite often honor Baldr in the sun and in the brightness of things and that sort of stuff, right? So it is very likely, okay, or very common for folks nowadays to honor him in that way. I don't know, again, of anything from a historical aspect or in Archeheathen times that there was a specific bloat dedicated to Baldr, all right? For instance, like we have bloat dedicated to Freyr, and bloats dedicated to Thor, and to Odin, and things like. We have examples and sources that can back up that this is what was done. We don't really see anything like that about Baldr. Now, my own personal view on it, my little bitty VPG, which I've already kind of gone into a little bit about that, is yes, I have added him to ritual work, especially during the summer months when it's the sun is at its hottest and at its brightest. We want to remember the brightness of Baldr. We want to commemorate how he was loved, and it's an interesting thing to note that in the story of Baldr's death, when he is killed by his blind brother, he in order for like the price to pay after he is killed and goes to Helheim, in order for Hel to be satisfied and to release him from her realm, it is said that she requires that all things weep for Baldr. And of course, if you know the story, if you haven't, you can always read up on it. Everything does weep for Baldr except I believe it's the giant Toki, and it's or Tok, and it's generally recognized as Loki in disguise, who does not weep for Baldr. And the reason why I mention that is because it brought up an interesting thing to me. Is we as pagans, as we as Norse pagans, have we, in our way or in respectively, have we wept for Baldr? And how to apply that in a ritual form, and it's something to think about, and it's something interesting to perhaps add to the mixture of your ritualistic practices. So again, my personal dealings and how the god Baldr has expressed or shown himself to me in my ritual has been very subtle. It hasn't been like a big thing. He's not one of the major gods that I hail regularly, although I do try to honor him in ritual at certain times, specifically for those specific reasons. So I'm genuinely interested to hear what you guys think about Baldr, how, if at all, he has made his presence known to you and your ritualistic practices. If you want to share all that stuff, head down into the comments and let me know. Would love to hear it. So everybody that's watching live on Facebook, please stick around because I want to check all the comments like I usually do. And everybody that watches live or watches on the YouTube channel, let me just say thank you all so much for your continued support. All my patrons on Patreon, thank you for your support. Anybody that's interested, just check the description down below for ways that you can help support Midgard Musings. It's genuinely and very much so appreciated. So thank you all again for watching today's episode, and I'll see you next week. Hail!